we inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us on this brand new edition of the program here on AFR. I'm Walker Wildmon. Rick Green and I host the show each week, and we're glad to have you with us on the program. As a reminder, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. So go to your podcast store and type in the name of the program, At the Core, and you can click the subscribe or the follow button, and we will cue the podcast up in your inbox, in your library each and every day. And that's a convenient way for you to listen to the program. All right, well, our scripture for the week, we've been in Proverbs chapter 24, looking at verses 1 and 2. Do not be envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them, for their minds devise violence, and their lips talk of trouble. All right, and this bodes well with the passage out of 1 Corinthians talking about not how bad company corrupts good character. And this fits well with that teaching. And so we don't need to want or desire to be like or be with evil men. We should flee from it because of the sin and the evil and wickedness that follows when you surround yourself with other evil men. So that's Proverbs chapter 24, verse 1 and 2. And it just drives home the fact that it does matter who we surround ourselves with. You know, some people, some believers are naive to think that they can spend vast amounts of their time around sinners and unbelievers and those who don't profess Christ, and that's not going to affect them at all. That's just not true. It's just not true. We have to surround ourselves with godly people. That's Proverbs 24, verses 1 and 2. All right, an event we have coming up in October, which registration is actually going to close here in the next few weeks, but the first weekend of October, this is the weekend with AFA, October 2 through 4. We're going to be here in Tupelo, Mississippi. We're going to have a couple of days of retreat, a couple of days of fellowship and encouragement here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So if you want to join us, it's called A Weekend with AFA, October 2nd through the 4th. Of course, this is coming up pretty quickly, under a month now. You're going to want to go ahead and register right now if you do want to come. But you can go to afa.net/weekend, afa.net/weekend to find out more information. And probably this is the last week to go ahead and register. At least I would operate under that assumption with it being so close. afa.net/weekend to check it out. That's October 2nd through the 4th, coming up here in just a couple weeks. All right, let's jump into the news of the week. There's a lot we could talk about. We could talk about what's going on in Israel with the continued hostage situation in Gaza. We've got President Trump clamping down on violent crime in Washington, D.C., using his powers as chief executive of a federal city, and this threat to deploy federal resources to other cities, which is being discussed right now, including Chicago and other places. New Orleans is now on the target list. And the in a related topic, the Secretary of State Marco Rubio commented on President Trump striking via military action the cartels that were attempting to smuggle in enough fentanyl and other illicit drugs to kill millions of American citizens. These were cartels coming from Venezuela. They've been designated as a foreign terrorist organization. President Trump took decisive military action, struck the cartel, killed 11 cartel members that were trying to smuggle thousands of pounds of drugs into the U.S. that would kill up to 20 million Americans. And Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, very eloquently and rightly described the threat of these cartels, which these cartels are some people don't view them as much of a threat, folks. They are. They're responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths in America every single year from overdoses. Let's listen to clip 3.
We cannot continue to just treat these guys as local street gangs. They have weaponry that looks like what terrorists, in some cases armies have. They control territory in many cases. Those cartels extend from the Maduro regime in Venezuela, which is not a legitimate government. We don't recognize the Maduro regime as legitimate. It is a criminal enterprise, all the way to the various different cartels that operate in Mexico. And in between, you find them in Ecuador, you find them in Guatemala, you find TDA, what people would call street gangs, but actually are operating as criminal enterprises, but very well organized ones. So what it changes is it gives us legal authorities to target them in ways you can't do if they're just a bunch of criminals. It's no longer a law enforcement issue. It becomes a national security.
All right, well, there you have it. That's Secretary of State Marco Rubio talking about the strike against the cartels and the threat of the cartels. This is a serious threat. This isn't to be taken lightly, because we have the direct overdose deaths, which is over 100,000 annually. Then you have on top of that just the sheer carnage that these drugs have on individuals and families. The sheer carnage, meaning divorce, abuse, neglect, employment issues, which affects one's livelihood. You have the foster system being affected with this. You have fatalities of infants. I just saw a recent report where you had an infant fatality that because of exposure to fentanyl. And so the carnage here is broad. The carnage is deep, and it doesn't take anyone but about 60 seconds to understand the gravity of these illicit drugs, these illegal drugs. And so the cartels are smuggling them into the homeland, and Americans are suffering because of it, all right? And so President Trump took decisive action, and this is what it's like. This is what it is like to have your priorities in order, all right? Because we can go over to Iran, we can go over to the Middle East, we can pick a fight with somebody, we can probably justify a fight with somebody in a far, far away land. We can talk about how bad the Russia-Ukraine war is, of which it is a humanitarian crisis. But in our own backyard, these cartels are running the show. And this has been going on for decades. And the administrations have deployed law enforcement resources towards this, but never military resources towards this, at least not at any scale. But when you look at the scale of the crisis, it totally justifies military deployment against these cartels. These cartels are effectively serving as not just criminal enterprises. In many cases, they're serving as a form of a foreign militia. These guys are well armed. They've got well integrated networks. They've got many of these Central and South American governments captive, meaning through blackmail, through corruption, through payoffs, kickbacks, whatever you want to call it. And this is the problem. This is the story of Mexico. I mean, as beautiful as Mexico is and as much potential as it has, the fact of the matter is their government is deeply corrupt, all right? Deeply corrupt. Major issue. Why? Partly because of the cartels, all right? A lot of the government, including the president of Mexico, they're virtually, maybe not all, but the vast majority of the elected officials in Mexico are corrupt in some manner, right? Or they turn a blind eye because they don't want to have the cartel come into their house at night. And so it's a major issue. And that's in our own backyard. And then this, of course, bleeds into the homeland, bleeds into to the United States. And when you have porous borders, it makes the matter 10 times worse. So President Trump took action. This is what's needed to protect the homeland. And you have to send a signal to these cartels that we're not doing it anymore. We're not turning a blind eye. We're not going easy on you. We're not just going to send the cops after you, which the law enforcement has limited resources when you're dealing with foreign terrorist organization, foreign cartels. What's a local police department? What's the FBI going to do when the cartels are running their operations out of Venezuela and Mexico? What are you going to do? That's a sovereign territory. So you have to bring in the military, and that's what they're doing. And I think we need to escalate it. I think we need to escalate it to eventually just cut off the flow of drugs into the homeland. That's just what you're going to have to do. And I don't doubt that the cartels are going to put up a fight. I mean, when you look at the billions of dollars at stake, there's no doubt the cartels are going to put up a fight. Who knows what that looks like? But it's justified. That's my point, is the action is justified, the threat is real, and the cartels have been getting away with this for decades, and it's time that comes to an end. And it's a viable, valid use of our military, all right? Protecting the homeland, protecting threats right on our doorstep. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about the CDC, Department of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr. He was at a hearing in the Senate this week. I believe it was in the Finance Committee, probably talking about the budget for HHS, but then, they don't talk about what they're there to talk about. They talk about other things. And boy, these Democrat senators just were trying to rail RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's the Secretary of Health and Human Services, trying to accuse him of undermining America's health, undermining the institutions like the Centers for Disease Control, and they were just trying to give him the hardest time. And what I love about RFK Jr. in this instant is he fought back. I mean, he fought back like a bulldog. He wasn't having it. They were sometimes getting in these shouting matches, and I'm just glad that RFK Jr. took on the Democrats because they were playing dirty, they were playing unfair, they were mischaracterizing his statements and his actions. And so let's start this off with the first clip. And the first clip here is clip 4. And this is RFK Jr. It's only about 15 seconds, talking about how the Centers for Disease Control has overseen the last 30 to 40 years a rapid decline in the health and well-being of America's children. Let's listen to clip 4.
We are the sickest country in the world. That's why we have to fire people at CDC. They did not do their job. This was their job to keep us healthy.
Thank you,
and
Mr.
I need to fire some of those people to make sure this doesn't happen again.
There you have it. So RFK Jr. saying, look, the CDC's been, quote, over all of this when it comes to childhood vaccinations, looking after the health and well-being of children, recommending different treatments and shots. And they're overseeing, they've overseen since the 1940s and since then, the worst decline in America's health and our existence. Things are getting worse, and they've been getting worse since the CDC started. And so this is not like, everything's going great, everybody's happy, childhood obesity is at record lows, age expectancy, life expectancy is at record highs, everything's great, and here RFK Jr. is coming in and just messing up the whole party. No, it's the opposite. Everything's bad, everything's trending in the wrong direction. The CDC has become an arm of the pharmaceutical industry. That's a fact. And RFK Jr. talks about this. We'll get to that maybe later. But this whole notion that the CDC is perfect, done everything up to par, everything's going great, America is as healthy as it's ever been. No, it's the opposite. Things are going terribly. Americans picked up on it and said, we've got to have change. They elected Donald Trump. Donald Trump pledged to partner with RFK Jr. He's at HHS now as secretary, and he is doing some good stuff, including, by the way, let me note, they've got a report coming out probably in the next 30 days or less on the connection between childhood vaccines and autism. This is a big deal, big scandal, by the way. This has been covered up. Meanwhile, you've got President Trump telling Pfizer and others, hey, you better show me the data on these COVID jabs. I want to see it. We'll be back in a few.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the program. Walker Wildmon here on this edition of The Core. Well, we've got a guest with us this segment to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill, which is actually what it's called, according to the legislative text that President Trump and the Republicans in the House and the Senate passed recently, as of, let's say, a couple months ago. And a lot is in this bill. You've got reforms to the tax code. You've got funding for the border and border security. You have Pell Grant reform, opening that up to different types of skilled labor and trade schools, which is excellent. Just a lot going on in this legislation, and including the defunding of abortion providers through Medicaid reimbursements, a very big win for the pro-life community. And so Richard Harris is on with us now, Executive Director of Truth and Liberty, to talk about some of the things that are in this bill. So Richard, welcome to the program.
Hey, great to be with you, Walker.
Well, Richard, let's break this down, because if you listen to the media and even some Republicans, you would hear that, oh, this is going to add $4 trillion to our deficit, to our debt over the next 10 years, which I'm thinking we're adding like multi-trillion a year, so $4 trillion over 10 years doesn't really sound that big of a deal. But nonetheless, you get kind of these negative talking points that basically this is a bad bill. That's kind of the messaging you've gotten from the Democrats and some in the media. But tell us what's in it, because this is a very transformative piece of legislation for multiple reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a big bill. So that's a big question. But I'll start off just by saying, yeah, anytime you have the Democrats supposedly complaining about increasing the deficit, you can rest assured it's a smokescreen, that there's something else they're really worried about. So the Congressional Budget Office, when they scored this legislation, they predicted it would increase the national debt by 2.7 trillion over 10 years. But their numbers were wonky, Walker, for several reasons. The first one is because they were counting, they estimated a $3.7 trillion loss in revenue because of Trump's tax cuts. Well, those tax cuts have already been in effect since 2017. So we're talking about existing tax rates that are all this bill did was make them permanent. In other words, take away the sunset provision. So to count that as a loss in revenue is just not really accurate. Is maintaining the cuts that nearly every American enjoyed. Trillions of dollars were given back to hardworking Americans in 2017 with Trump's tax cuts, and it made that permanent. So it's not fair to count that as a loss, first of all. Second of all, the CBO predicted that the economy would only grow by 1.8%. Well, the average over the last 10 years is 2.2%. So they're undercutting it that way. And then they did not include revenue from Trump's tariffs. After they scored this bill, they came out with a separate report and said, oh, yeah, if those tariffs stay in place, they're going to probably raise, I think the number was $3 trillion approximately. Mm-hmm. When you add all those things together, it looks like Trump's people were right. We're pretty close to right. This thing will actually cut the deficit by approximately $4 to $6 trillion over 10 years. So for that reason alone, I love this bill. It's definitely a massive step in the right direction. But to talk about winners and losers, this is where it gets kind of fun. The first thing is the losers, brother. The losers, it's a difficult to swallow, but let me share with you. First of all, it's going to be people that are on welfare that are able to work. All right. So Trump imposes work requirements on people that are getting their health care expenses paid by the taxpayers. In other words, Medicaid. He's also kicking illegal immigrants off of Medicaid. Like you said in your opening, he defunds Planned Parenthood. In other words, we're not going to use our taxpayer-funded health care to reimburse a company that kills babies in the womb. And then you've got inefficient state governments. There's going to be a penalty for those who have an error rate in administering Medicaid benefits of more than 6%. costs are going to be shifted to them. And so these are losers, as well as wind, solar, and electric vehicle boondoggles that were handed out under the Green New Deal. Those are all canceled. And then we've got deadbeat college students. So those people who went to college on government-funded student loans and don't want to pay them back, and Biden said, that's great with me since you all vote Democrat. Well, that's over too. So all of those are the losers. And don't know where you sit. Well, I do. But to me, that's not a very sympathetic crowd of losers.
No.
But the winners, brother, are phenomenal. Basically, and I'm not overstating this, it's almost all Americans. First off, the 2017 tax cuts being made permanent. Almost every taxpayer in America received a benefit from that. But he also focuses in on those who are hardest hit by Biden's inflation. You know, at one point in the Biden administration, we were suffering under 20% inflation. People couldn't afford to buy groceries for their families. Overtime is no longer going to be taxed. Neither are tip earners, income from tips over $25,000. And then he's also, as you mentioned, funding the border wall. Lower income Social Security recipients are going to receive an additional $4,000 deduction in their income taxes. So the elderly and Social Security recipients, parents get an increased child tax credit. New car buyers, you buy an American car, you're going to be able to deduct that interest, as well as many other groups, including the greatest thing I love about this is he's rewarding people for having children now, not punishing them for it. Newborns under this bill will have an automatically available savings account created by the federal government that parents can put into for that child's future, and also scholarships. He's created a special incentive program for private charities to donate towards scholarship funds that will enable parents to send their kids to schools of their choice. He's also opening up, making it easier to explore for oil and gas on federal lands and offshore, also timber harvesting, AI development, building the Golden Dome, and as you said, the border wall. So in my judgment, this bill is almost a miracle, the things that it accomplishes while simultaneously reducing the federal deficit.
That's right. And to your point early on about the tariff revenue and how that could offset a lot of these new expenditures, not existing expenditures, but new expenditures. In reality, if things go well, once again, things have to line up pretty well for all this to work out. And you have to also assume continuity of government, meaning like-minded administrations ongoing for the next 5 to 10 years, which is possible with J.D. Vance. But nonetheless, my point is that theoretically, there is a likelihood here that you could have all of these new expenses completely offset by tariff revenue. You could have basically this as a break-even bill where it pays for itself through the tariff revenue over the course of that 10-year period. But furthermore, either way it goes, the border wall in and of itself, and then we'll talk about some of the other things you mentioned, getting the entire border wall funded is like a conservative victory that none of us could have even imagined, because we were fighting for to get 3 miles under Trump 1.0 with Mitch McConnell in the Senate and Paul Ryan. I mean, we couldn't even get 3 miles. It was like we were just having to pull teeth to get just a couple miles of border wall. This bill funds the whole thing. This isn't something that can be rescinded, assuming we get it built in the next 3.5 years. It is what it is. I mean, they would have to bulldoze it down, which wouldn't put it past them. But the Democrats can't stop this. The wall will be built over the next 4 years.
Yeah, fantastic. Trump has already closed the border with, by just enforcing the laws that we have effectively. But to erect a border wall is going to provide security for America for years and years to come. And why anyone in their right mind would be opposed to that is a little bit beyond me, given the scope and magnitude of the problem that we're facing today with illegal immigration. But the Democrats are, and because of they stand to gain from illegal immigration politically. Fantastic development, something that took far too long to accomplish, but thank the Lord it has been.
Absolutely. Talk a little bit about the defunding of abortion providers through Medicaid reimbursements. This is about $700 to $800 million industry. Specifically, I'm talking the Medicaid reimbursement to abortion providers. Talk about that provision, because that was it's a 12-month application, so we'll have to look at renewing it. But either way, 12 months, Planned Parenthood and others aren't going to be able to apply for Medicaid reimbursements.
Yeah, that's right. So under federal law, federal dollars cannot be spent directly on abortion already. However, the federal government's been sending hundreds of millions of dollars to Planned Parenthood for so-called other healthcare related services provided to women. But Planned Parenthood's records show, Walker, you've seen these numbers, that it's actually a very small percentage of their services are non-abortion related. And
Right.
most of those services are only given to women who come in for the primary service, which is abortion. Furthermore, all of those non-abortion related services are readily available at community health centers at no cost to women all over the country. In fact, there's like 5 to 7 times more community health centers than there are Planned Parenthood clinics. So we don't have to worry about underprivileged women not being able to get access to rudimentary women's health care. It is not a problem in this country. So this is good news because we know that they say, well, that doesn't go to abortion, but you know what? If I give you $500 million for this part of your business, all that does is free up your cash to spend on abortion and abortion promotion and LGBT indoctrination services and destroying marriages and everything else you do. So it's high time that this happened, and yeah, we should rejoice over this because in the bottom line of it is it means babies' lives saved. And I think we're up to 48 Planned Parenthoods closed across the nation already. So this is definitely good.
Absolutely. And you have to think, yes, it's a 12-month application, but if we can make it to where, to your point, we've already got dozens shutting down of these abortion facilities, especially in conservative states, because we're just not having it. And they can't operate. They can't legally operate. And it actually proves a point that the majority of what they are doing is actually abortion, especially from a monetary standpoint, because otherwise, why shut down, right? If you've got all this other stuff you're offering. But no, they're primarily relying on abortion for their revenue. And but if you can shut them down, my point is that even if you only shut them down for a year and then they can start reapplying for Medicaid, you've majorly disrupted their business operations. You've majorly disrupted their operations to such a degree that getting back off the ground and setting back up shop in these communities is going to be very challenging for them financially and legally. And so I think that my point is that the effect here is going to go beyond 12 months. I mean, this is a big, big deal to cut these abortion providers off from Medicaid. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention was I think the child, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the child tax credit bumped up to $2,500 permanently, as opposed to $2,000. And then you have
Yes.
the child savings account, which is, if that's invested in the stock market, it's going to grow over the course of their minor years and to a pretty good nest egg.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So what you see Trump doing, this is a very pro-family bill when you think about it. It's promoting families having children and those children having a future, and it's discouraging, this destructive philosophy that's invaded our culture that children are a burden. And so, I think it deserves a lot of support and praise for that reason. So I really appreciate you pointing those things out. Those are great points.
All right, we've had on with us Richard Harris with Truth and Liberty. Hey, Richard, tell our folks your website, a little bit about your show, and how they can check out all the work that you do.
Oh, thank you, Walker. Yeah. So our website is truthandliberty.net. It's all one word, Truth and Liberty. And yeah, you can go there and find our resources page. You can watch all of our programs and learn about our events. We've got a conference coming up next week that's going to be phenomenal. Charlie Kirk will be with us. He's going to be the keynote on Thursday night next week. Have Pastor Lorenzo Sewell. I'll be speaking, as will Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, and a detransitioner named Lauren Perry Smaltz. We're going to have a candidate forum amongst Colorado candidates for governor. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, so check us out there. My show airs, Walker, on our website, as well as on all of our social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and so forth, and then also on the television network of Andrew Womack Ministries. It's called Gospel Truth Network, or GTN.
Yeah, tell Lauren I said hello. She was featured in our documentary In His Image about God's design for gender and sexuality. So good lineup you got there at your conference, at your event. And thanks so much for coming on the program, Richard.
Thanks for having me. It's been an honor. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's Richard Harris with the Truth and Liberty talking about the one big beautiful bill and all of the winners and losers. And when you break it down like he did, that's a pretty solid piece of legislation, that has the potential to really set our country off on a good track. Another thing that's not factored into this legislation is the drastic reduction in services and monies required to fund illegal immigration. Because when you have the burden, which gets into the hundreds of billions of dollars, of the burden that illegal immigrants are on our system, from the hospitals to the fire departments to the police departments to our schools, it's hundreds of billions of dollars annually that you and I are paying to house these illegal immigrants and provide all these government services for them. That's not even mentioning Medicaid, Social Security, and all these other benefits, SNAP that they're applying for, which also get into the billions. But Congressional Budget Office they don't even factor that in. Well, that's unrelated. No, it's not. That's a net effect of this legislation. And so you continue, and this is the importance of mass deportations. You continue the mass deportations, you are drastically reducing the burden, the financial and otherwise burden, on America's systems. And you're freeing those systems up that are intended for American citizens, for American taxpayers. And so the benefits here, folks, to closing our border and deporting illegal immigrants, the benefits here are massive, financial and otherwise. We'll be back in a few.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to The Core here on American Family Radio. Walker Wildmon here. Chris Woodward in with us, as he is each week, to bring us the news of the week from American Family News. AFN.net is the URL. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Well, Chris, there's some economic numbers coming out just as we're doing the program on this pre-recorded Thursday afternoon. That is. Tell us some of those numbers that we were getting. These are employment numbers from ADP.
Yeah, ADP is a payroll processor, so who better to know things like how many jobs were created than people hired to do payroll for a number of companies across these United States of America. We got 54,000 jobs added in August. 54,000 jobs added in August. Experts thought we'd see somewhere in the neighborhood of 75,000, which is nothing to write home about. But a lot of people are going with the headline number, disappointing ADP number, only 54,000. We thought we'd see 75, that kind of thing. I noticed in a lot of the news articles about this, there's a comment from ADP's chief economist, Neela Richardson, who said, quote, "This year started with strong job growth, but that momentum has been whipsawed by uncertainty. A variety of things could explain the hiring slowdown, including labor shortages, skittish consumers, and AI disruptions. I would add something. It is possible that we are seeing more accurate numbers under this administration compared to the previous guy named Joe Biden."
Yes. Because the revisions that we saw under Biden's Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, which is separate from ADP, but they usually track close together. They had revisions to over 1 million one year, where they revised them down hundreds of thousands, like 100,000 a month on average. They were revising them down. Nonetheless, Chris, this doesn't surprise me. Assuming ADP's numbers are accurate, and even assuming this trend continues for the next couple of months, I don't think it will, but we'll just see. We've had record, in modern history, record level interest rates, both on the commercial side and on the mortgage side. And you've had Bidenomics, which was a disaster. I mean, the amount of wealth that Americans lost under Biden can't be forgotten. And so with that being said, and I've said this before, I don't think the recovery is just like, oh, snap a finger, Trump gets in there, and boom, everything's back to normal.
You're right.
No, no president can come in that quickly, even with a Congress, and quote fix what Biden did over the course of 4 years. What Biden did was an absolute disaster, and so I think things could be a little sluggish for a little while. I said 2 to 4 years for a recovery, and when I say a recovery, I'm talking about getting back to where we were pre-COVID, right? Mortgage rates 3%, 3.5%. GDP 3-4%. Who knows? We'll see. Employment pretty steady. I just think it's going to take a little time. So these numbers really don't surprise me.
No, they really don't. I mean, we talked when he took office or was about to re-enter office, we talked about how really under the rosiest outlooks, you weren't going to see real change or improvement until maybe spring of 2026, which would not be a bad thing because you've got people running for re-election or running for Congress and the Senate come 2026. So it will take some time. One thing that I noticed today was there was an article, it was in the CNN Money section, and it said Trump vowed to lower energy prices. They're not down. Well, okay, he did say that, and they're not down. You can write your article however you want to, but where was that I'm going to hold your feet to the fire under Joe Biden? Right. Joe Biden said he had a plan. Elect me. I'll get in there and make America America again and all these things back in 2020. Right. And clearly his policies caused many people to face starvation because they couldn't afford food at the grocery store unless they swiped a credit card and put more debt on themselves than they were, already carrying. Yeah. So even the media doesn't help here because they're holding Trump to a standard they didn't do his predecessor, who is responsible for some of the things Trump's trying to fix.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. And I do think this is going to take some time. Now, the article you mentioned, and once again, a lot of these things that we read are kind of market analysts speculating on what's leading to, for example, only, I think, was it 70,000 jobs added or
54,000.
54,000 as opposed to like expecting 70, 75. They're trying to speculate as to what's leading to this kind of cool jobs report. It's not negative, but it's not smoking hot either. AI was mentioned. I don't know, Chris, if AI this quickly would begin to show on the jobs reports.
I don't think either.
I think we're talking years before you've got. Now, I know some of the tech companies have started laying off to the tune of hundreds, some companies, and even thousands. But I think they're just cutting overhead. I don't think it's because they've got AI that can do the job. So I'm not so sure this quickly, we're talking 12 to 24 months into the whole AI revolution, that you're going to start seeing that affect jobs reports. I may be wrong, but I just think it's a little too soon for that.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, what are you defining as AI? I mean, AI technically existed before it became a household term. We just didn't call it AI. So True. If you're talking about we got rid of the person that came up with our website's daily poll and replaced that person with ChatGPT, it's a bit of a stretch to say that AI is taking over and things like that. There were good things in this ADP report. For example, leisure and hospitality contributed the most by adding 50,000 jobs. Construction was in second place. You want construction to be up and for construction jobs to be out there because, as we've talked about on this show, Dan Celia said this for years, construction was one thing he always looked for because if you're not growing unless you're building things. And because you're building things are being made and other people are making money doing things for the construction workers. Yeah. So construction was doing well in the previous month, according to ADP.
You know, Chris, I think another thing that needs to be considered here, once again, we're talking about the jobs report from ADP, which is a private payroll company, but they've got pretty good numbers. They're the largest in the country from payroll standpoint. The elevated interest rates. I think this is one reason President Trump is just upset that Jerome Powell is sitting on his hands at the Federal Reserve, refusing to budge on interest rates because that affects lending for businesses.
It does.
And then it ends up affecting growth and hiring for businesses.
It does.
And so I think President Trump understands here that, hey, these high interest rates, this doesn't just have to do with mortgages. This is across the board. Businesses aren't able to lend, aren't able to borrow at a lower rate, and it's starting to affect the economy.
Yeah, I mean, Jerome Powell does not care about my opinion, but I would say at this point, just go ahead and do it.
Right.
I mean, what else are you
25
waiting
basis
for?
points.
Right.
50 basis points.
It's not going to kill the economy, just like all these things Trump has done since he re-entered office have not killed the economy.
Right.
So all these things that you were concerned about, including tariffs, it's not the doom and gloom that we were told.
Right.
So what's it going to hurt if you just go, you know what, let's try it?
Well, and inflation popped back up to 3% or over 3%, one of the measures. And we've still got elevated interest rates. So I thought Jerome Powell was in control of interest rates because that's what he claims.
That's true.
He claims that the Fed lowers inflation
Right.
by raising interest rates. But here we are with raised interest rates for the last 2 years, and now we got inflation popping its head back up. Now, I don't think it's going to stay up. I think it's going to go back down. But nonetheless, it just proves that he doesn't have a magic wand that he just waves the wand and inflation goes down and then he can lower rates. It's way more complicated than that. And you've got the president's policies at play. You've got congressional spending at play. You've got tariff policy at play. There's a lot of moving parts that affects inflation. It's not just what Jerome Powell says. But I think he's going to have to come down. And the ironic thing, Chris, is it's looking like he's going to lower interest rates with inflation elevated.
Sure. Yeah.
After he spent 2 years telling us, I can't lower rates because inflation's still elevated.
That's very true. You know, I realize that Donald Trump has had some business ventures that did not work well. Maybe they were just gimmicky. But he knows what he's doing. He's worked for years with a lot of people, including unions, and to do all kinds of things.
And he's got a team,
Yes.
a very, very experienced team around him.
So what I'm trying to say is, I think the guy probably knows a little bit of what he's talking about here. He's not somebody that was a community organizer who just ran in the right circles with enough billionaires to tell him which direction to move. He knows what he's talking about.
That's right. Exactly. Chris, let's talk a little bit about energy.
Yes.
We've talked about, nuclear. We've talked about the refinery capacity and how energy does affect inflation as well. So tell us a little bit about some of the reports you got on that.
Yes, energy impacts inflation because the cheaper energy is, the less of a concern inflation is, basically. It's the poor man's explanation of it there. So you want energy prices to be lower and not sky high like they were under President Biden and his energy policies, which turned out to be disastrous. This week, a Midwest refinery flooding caused a jump at the pump. That's according to AAA, which says today's national average for a gallon of regular is $3.20. The good news is that's not up that much from it was this time last month, and it's cheaper than it was this time last year. But that, again, is one of the things that media was pointing to is that, Trump said he was going to do this, and gas is going up. One thing that the president needs to do, and perhaps he's had this conversation with the energy secretary or the interior secretary, but we need to do more refineries. The economy, the country is growing. There are people coming here. There's people moving all throughout the country to take jobs or whatever. And you need more refinery capacity to not have to worry about things like flooding in the Midwest or a hurricane in the Southeast. All these kinds of things that we experience on a yearly basis that caused, temporary price spikes. So it would be a good idea if people would listen to this program and take our suggestions that we need to have more refineries. And I think the president has maybe hinted at that in the past.
Yeah, and to your point, Chris, this is not something that you're looking 5 years down the road going, well, we're just not going to need fossil fuels anymore, right? We're going to be all nuclear, or we're going to be all on batteries and solar and wind, or however you want to, position that. The reality is, and nobody's disputing this, is that we're going to be on fossil fuels for as long as we can think.
Sure.
I mean, there's no sign, even if you start adopting alternative fuel sources, you're still not going to move completely off of fossil fuels. So that's complete fantasy land. My point is that it isn't as if, like, in 5 years, fossil fuels are going to be irrelevant and we don't need the capacity, et cetera. Investing in refining capacity is like a 50 to 100-year project as far as the payoff. It's going to pay off, and it's going to be needed for decades to come.
People don't realize this, but a lot of stuff that we use and wear and whatnot, a lot of things in our daily lives are petroleum-based products.
That's right.
This pen the shirts that we wear.
Diesel.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that petroleum products go into. So we're not talking about necessarily even fuel in a tank, but that's one thing to think about that will help pay off the expansion.
Yeah.
And also too, at a time when China is still saying we're going to take over Taiwan, Russia clearly doesn't see an end in sight for its war with Ukraine, and then you throw in Iran and all these other countries. You need to make sure you have some resources to go after.
And even, Chris, even if our consumption leveled off because of fuel efficiency and adopting nuclear, even if our consumption plateaued, right, for a decade, which I don't think it will, even if it did, worst case scenario, the consumption of fossil fuels flatlines, you've got all these other countries, to your point, that need it. Right?
Yeah.
People in Africa aren't driving Teslas, right? They're driving
News alert.
They're driving diesel burning and gasoline burning trucks, right? So, and Mexico, Canada. So not everybody's, in this advanced economic status where we can look at, driving our cars off of batteries. So my point is we could export. Even if we flatline our consumption domestically, we could export billions of dollars in energy to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and they would happily take it because you need fossil fuels to have a growing economy.
Yeah.
Part of the reason we are the country that we are is because of fossil fuels.
And right now, for example, we're telling India, hey, you can't buy your fossil fuels. You can't buy your coal and your gas and your whatever diesel from Russia, right? Because big bad Russia, they say.
Right.
Which I get it, right? The president's trying to leverage and to get Putin to the table. But India is over here going, well, who do you want us to buy it from, right? It's Russia's the major player. It's the U.S. and Russia. They're the major players in the energy production market. China's nowhere to be found in this market. And so where do we've got to have energy, right? So they're going to Russia. We're saying, no, you can't go to Russia. And they're going, well, where do I go? And we don't have enough capacity to export the amount that they need.
Right.
So we could solve a lot of problems with more refining capacity.
Sure. Yeah. When India says where should I go, Texas would like a word.
Yeah.
Or Louisiana.
But then you get then you start affecting domestic prices.
Yeah.
Right. If we're having to export a bunch, and then it's supply and demand, right? And then so Trump doesn't want energy prices to go up. So. But we need to get to a point, to your point, where Texas and Louisiana, all these U.S. states can export.
And we need to stay doing that and not turn around every 4 years with some other president.
Green New Deal.
Yeah, and then
project.
we have people may have forgotten about this, but Energy Secretary Granholm under Biden, she made comments one time that she dreamed of a day in which we would have tanks and other things in our military that were electric.
Give me a break. Never in a million years are we going to be carrying that kind of weight on batteries.
Right.
I can't even keep my laptop up without plugging it in every 3 hours. Goodness. And you got to charge your Tesla every 200 miles. And charge it for 8 hours. Don't get me started on all that. Folks, thanks for joining the program. Chris, appreciate you coming on. AFN.net is their website. Check out their news source from a Christian perspective. Subscribe to the newsletter. We'll see you next time.
The views and opinions expressed